Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Tiffany Hunter, energy healer in the United States. Welcome to the Life Made Easier podcast. Here you're going to find ancient wisdom with a modern approach. In each episode, we're going to share useful information from the world of energy healing. We hope to give you ideas that develop and enhance your energy intelligence so you can make your life easier in simpler and practical ways.
And I'm Dr. Karen James, a psychologist and energy healer in the UK. And in today's episode, we're going to begin a conversation about auras. What is an aura? How does it work? Why is it important to know about it? And what should you do to look after it?
So, an aura is an energy organ in the energy anatomy, and it has a job to do just like our physical organs in our physical anatomy have a job to do. It has 7 layers, and it's integrated into other parts of our energy anatomy, in particular our chakra system. It changes size, it changes density, kind of naturally and spontaneously, not dissimilar to the way our facial expressions change. And we're going to use the word aura here, but you can also use the word biofield. While historically scientists and skeptics would talk about how the aura doesn't exist, the last few decades have actually brought in some pretty good science as our instrumentation and our ability to measure energy has changed and gotten more sensitive. We can now actually measure what the aura is, and people are calling it a biofield. If you're hearing hesitation in my voice, it's because the science behind the data is a little mixed. Not all of it is fantastic. It's a really difficult problem with external validation for those that know what that means. And in particular, getting people to share their information and not having some proprietary control over it. But for the purposes of this podcast, then the information that we're covering here, we're going to call it an aura, and we're just going to come from a starting point that it exists and that you have one, and we're going to give you some information to help you look after it.
I just had an urge then to make a joke about, does my aura look big in this? So if we're coming from a place of every living thing has an aura, and we can also think of it, I mean, Tiffany's described it a little bit, but we can also think of it as an energy field that surrounds us. So by living thing, think humans, plants, trees, mammals, animals, fish, birds, that kind of stuff. And we're familiar with the idea of someone having a physical body, and there is also an energy field around us that extends a bit beyond our visible physical edges. So, in a way, you can think of yourself and other living things as kind of taking up a bit more space in the world than where your physical edges are. And ways that you might have experienced that, there's a number of different things. And, if you haven't experienced any of these, or you've only experienced one of them, that's, not anything to worry about, but very common ways that people describe something which would suggest they're having some awareness of the fact that they do extend out a bit beyond their physical body. One is feeling hairs go up on the back of your neck, and you turn around and someone's staring at you, and they haven't said anything, and maybe you didn't even know they were there, or you didn't know they were looking towards you, but you suddenly sensed something. And the reason that happens is there's some little part of someone's energy, their attention, that's kind of directed at you. And the back of the neck is a fairly sensitive area. So our aura registers that there's some connection between a part of someone else's energy and our energy field.
Yeah, a little like somebody throwing pebbles at you from across the room. You're like,
Yeah,
what's going on? And then you turn around and you can kind of see them. I think it's that experience, I think, is so common that I often use it when I am talking to people about whether or not energy is real. Because you'll be sitting in front of somebody who will be insisting the whole thing is snake oil and made up. But then if you ask them if they've had that experience, they'll say yes. Like, well,
yeah, and I think the other most kind of extended to that, like that sense of someone's looking at you even when you can't see them. So maybe if it's dark and you just suddenly sense something. But I think the other most common one, I don't know what you think, Tiffany, is when someone's standing close to you but they're not touching you, and you sometimes you might not have quite realized they were there, if you can't immediately see them, and suddenly it's like, oh, you just like feel some presence, if you like, and you look and it's a person or a cat or a dog or something. but also the reaction you have to them might not be what you're kind of expecting. So, for example, you might just look at somebody and not really see anything that you would have maybe a negative or positive reaction to. They just, they don't smell, they just look like an average person. You don't feel threatened by them. They're not doing anything that would be weird or unusual, yet somehow your body is responding in a way that doesn't quite match that. And that can be for better or worse, if you like. So you might have a like, oh, I really don't want to stand next to you and I've no idea why. Or, oh, you feel nice to kind of be around and I don't know why. And I think it's subtly different to, we might look at someone and think, oh, you're hot, or and then I'd quite like to stand next to you. It's something, a quality that's a bit different to that just feels like a very body reaction that's just like oh, I need a bit of space from you. I think that the more negative response is probably the one we notice more because it's uncomfortable. Often happens places like supermarkets, crowded kind of
Public
on public
transportation.
transport. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, places like that. But it gives you an experience of, again, that sense that you are actually a bit bigger than your physical edges, your physical body. And you may if you're with someone who you know well, maybe you also may sometimes have a sense of feeling them when you're not actually touching them. And it might be hard to put some of these things into words, but again, it's your energy field is bumping up against their energy field, that you're, a part of you is then registering and noticing.
When you say feeling them, I think we also want to expand it to feeling it, right?
Sure.
And
Yes. Yes.
when we talk about what the aura does, and which we are in a minute, and one of the purposes is to be that sensory organ, and so you can feel your aura is feeling that person that's standing in your aura. I don't think it would be a surprise when I use the word personal space for people to hear that. When people have a sense of their personal space, that's another way of saying how big my aura is. But it also, when you walk into a room and you have a sense of the room, that's partly coming, that information is partly coming through your aura. Your aura is picking those things, picking up that information. So I think if we can get across to people to stop thinking of yourselves as ending at your skin, but actually ending at your aura, that is an incredibly positive, transformative way to think of yourself. And it really changes how you'll perceive yourself walking through the world, and will change how you interpret the information that you're receiving already. You're already receiving the information, but it can give clarity on how to understand that information if you accept and you view yourself as not ending at your skin, but ending a little bit further out.
Yeah. One thing I've also noticed about people is it's almost like that information can, when you're feeling good about yourself, it's almost like you can allow yourself to take up that space. I don't know how else to describe that, but it's like there's a more positive kind of energy around somebody
Mm-hmm.
that again is, what's how we're feeling is also reflected in our aura. So that way we're describing, you might want to stand close to somebody or not stand close to somebody. Some of that is, that might not be because they're a bad person. It may be because they're just having a bad day.
Yeah.
They're in pain, or they just had an argument with somebody. And that energy is still kind of buzzing in their aura, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel comfortable to you. So it's not about people being good or bad necessarily. I mean, there may be people that we should, all stay away from. But it's more about just you may be picking up something or just feeling something that is in this moment right now isn't very comfortable to be around.
Yeah, and I do think to that end, it's most helpful to think of the aura again as an organ with a job to do, right?
Yeah.
Not an indictment on somebody's personality or their
Oh,
character.
yeah. Yes, that's a really
But
good way of putting it. Yeah, like if you have a blemish on your skin, it's not because you're a terrible person. It,
right.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So we already mentioned one of the jobs it has, which is to be a kind of sense organ. It's sensing the energy around. And that's actually really part of its biggest function, which is to be the filter, to be the boundary, very similarly to how our skin functions in our physical anatomy. So the aura is semi-permeable. Things go through it in both directions. Things from inside you, inside your body, inside your energy, even from your mind, that gets translated into energy, pours out of you through the aura out into the world. And then equally, the things that are around you in your energy, in the world around you, and the people coming out of their auras, comes through that aura, and some of it gets filtered, and some of it gets through. Just very similar to the skin.
Yeah, and in that sense as well, I mean, some of why we're talking about that is because we all know it's good to do various things to look after our skin, and we want for this organ that is called an aura, we want it to be functioning in as healthy a way as possible. So, like our skin, we know if we most of the time, if we're reasonably healthy, our skin does a really, really good job of being that selectively semi-permeable boundary that keeps all the squishy liquid, stuff inside us, and stops anything that we need to keep in falling out, and vice versa. So our skin, we know when we damage it, when we injure it, when it's abused in some way, I guess you could say, how effectively it works starts to be a problem. So you cut yourself, you're more at risk of getting an infection. And again, just like our skin, there are things that will impact it that we have absolutely no control over. A really good example of that is weather. We have no control over what the weather is doing, but we can have some control over how we take care of our skin in response to the weather. And so there's things like that help us to begin to think about, well, how do I need to sort of take care of my aura, by, I think, initially understanding what might impact it. So
initially understanding that it exists.
well, yes, that too. But we've kind of moved on from there. We're now in hopefully everybody's on the same page. And if they're really like auras don't exist, they probably stop listening. So
Yeah.
hopefully we've brought you with us. So we can also, again, I mean, I think hopefully we're not boring you with the comparing this to our skin, but I think it really is the easiest way to think about it. We know with our skin, what's outside our skin has an impact. What comes into contact with our skin from the outside has an impact, and what's happening inside has an impact. So in addition to things like the weather or just our environment, the energies around us impact our aura. And again, we don't have any control over those. What we eat or drink, what we put in our bodies, has an impact on our both our skin and our aura, in fact. Emotional conflict we might be feeling, particularly if we're suppressing something, we're trying to avoid feeling it, we're trying to push it away, or we feel we shouldn't be feeling the thing we're feeling, that will all have an impact on our aura. One of the other things we wanted to just mention here, I think, is you may have had an experience of being somewhere that just feels, the energy of it feels crappy, and you might not, that's a technical term, you may not have really necessarily understood why. And obviously there can be lots of reasons for that. It can be about the people who were there and your relationships with them, that if that person wasn't there, you'd be fine. But sometimes it is more about the energy of a place. And being somewhere where the energy around us isn't great for whatever reason, even if that not being great just isn't right for us, our first choice, our best choice would be to leave, to go somewhere else that feels better. But I think we also have to really accept we're in the real world, and you may have to work in a place where there's not great energy. And if you want to earn your money, you have to be there. And it may not be possible, at least in the immediate term, to just leave. So we're going to move on in a minute to some of the things you can do to help take care of your aura. But I think even just acknowledging that will have an impact, and it's okay that you're affected by it. Thinking about it as, your aura is there to protect you, and it will do its best, and it will do its best to repair itself afterwards. So, and some of the self-care things we're going to mention in a minute, I think will be helpful with that. So just acknowledging, this is a bit of a crappy energy here. I just need to breathe. I just need to stay here, and try and do my best, here until I can move, I think is a good kind of place to start.
And as you say, some things we can't control and some things we can. And I think one of the truths about our planet is that we are all subjected to entropy, right? So, a car can be sitting for 6 months and not be used. And the first time you use it, you're still going to have to take care of it. Like just merely existing creates wear and tear. Just being here on our planet creates wear and tear, let alone walking around and shopping and working and interacting and doing all those things. So when we talk about the kinds of damage that an aura can take, it really isn't dissimilar to the skin, just to keep, pounding that analogy. It's kind of supposed to be beaten up a little bit, right?
Mm.
I can spend my life never having any scrapes or calluses, but then I'm probably sitting in a plastic bubble somewhere, right? So it's not a failing or a problem, that things happen to the aura. Now, obviously, there's a difference between wear and tear and the kinds of things that happen from merely existing and living a life, and then there's things that are more traumatic that can be more impactful, and obviously that's the case. But all auras have to be looked after.
You made me think about what you said about the facial expressions earlier. I mean, we will all, if we're fortunate to live long enough, end up with some lines on our faces. If we go through
Right.
our life never moving our face, which means probably never communicating with anybody, never expressing any emotion, you may get to 90 without any lines on you, never going outside in weather, living in a climate controlled environment that's perfect for your like it's just, I think that's such a good point. I don't even know if I've ever really thought about it that way before. It's serving a function. It's like armor is meant to get dented.
Right.
Our roof is meant to withstand rain and wind that falls on it to stop it getting into our house. That's what something that serves a protective function is. It's the barrier between us and the things from outside that might impact it.
hmm You know what you make me think of, though, that I've never thought about before, is that an older person's aura is not more damaged than a younger person's if they've been taking care of it, in the way
Mm.
that my face is absolutely more wrinkled than it was 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago, right? And that's, I think, interesting about the energy part of
Mm.
us. It is more, yeah, I heard you go, yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, that's really interesting, right? Like the older people I've seen that have difficulties with their aura, or there's things in the aura that they can't repair, has mostly come from un from years of neglect,
Mm.
right? Rather than, and that is actually the reason for this podcast, right? Is part of that neglect has come from not even knowing they had one, let alone knowing how to take care of it, right? That
We do
sense,
not
what we
teach
talked
this
about.
in schools.
No, right. Like that's the energy intelligence, right?
Yeah,
Like we spent
yeah.
so long working out how to take care of our skin and hair and teeth, and zilch time figuring out how to do the aura. But assuming that that has happened well, the energy part of us is super resilient as
Yeah,
opposed
and
to the
I've
physical
certainly
part of
met older people who feel like their aura is really like strong and
us.
healthy, and if you could
Yeah.
physically see it, which some people do see something kind of visually.
hmm
I don't. I kind of more sense an aura rather than see it with my
hmm
physical eyes, if that makes sense.
hmm
Which I think is probably the more common way for people to tune in with an aura, because actually we haven't talked about that. A common question I think from clients of mine, and I'm sure this is probably true for you, Tiffany, too, is can you see my aura?
Hmm.
And the truth is, some healers can. I can't actually physically see an aura, um, but I can tune into it and I can sense it and I can
Yeah.
get information about it, how
Yeah,
healthy
I'm the
it is.
same. I'm naturally kinesthetic, but decades of having to talk to people who are visual, um, if you think about what your car looks like and you have an image in your head, that's how I see auras. Like
Mm.
I've learned to translate the kinesthetic information that's more natural to me into an image so that I can talk to somebody who is visual about what it looks like. But it's not as much fun as what you see in the movies.
No. Or
But
or
I know
those
where
aura
it is, right?
photographs that have all the colours and the funky lights and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Oh my gosh, totally lost my our train of thought, but that was super fun. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. In that same vein of older people with very strong auras, I've actually come across homeless people whose auras are stronger and healthier than the average person just walking around. Now, it's not
Mm.
often the case because I think there's a lot of drug abuse that can happen in the homeless population, but not always, obviously. And I have seen people who are living on the streets whose auras are quite strong because they just, I think, I'm not even so sure I have an explanation, but but it was a surprise to me when I started noticing that. And I thought it was an interesting thing about what is it that creates wear and tear on the aura and what doesn't.
That'd be an interesting research project.
Yeah, that would be fun. How in the world we would ever measure it, who knows, but we're working on it.
Yeah, yeah.
We're closer than we've ever been, yeah. So the thing that's interesting, which we've said indirectly, but I want to be explicit about, is that the aura is actually self-repairing. It's actually self-cleansing. But the best way to think about that is so is our skin. Like in the strictest, most technical way, our skin creates a self-cleansing process. Our hair is self-cleansing. But if you just imagine living in the world that we live in, if we allowed that process to be the only process that worked, we just don't live in a modern world that would be a healthy choice. And so the aura is the same. But the first way to take care of it is to understand that what enhances and increases that self repairing process. And one of the two strongest things are downtime. So rest away from the stimulants that can hurt it, and sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you say that I feel like there's so many parallels, isn't there, with our skin? I mean, we know good sleep is really important for our skin too.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and there's also ways that we can learn to clean and protect our auras. We kind of I think that's a subject for another podcast because I think that would really be well suited to really talking people through that. I mean,
Oh, for sure.
there are various techniques you can use for that. One very simple one that I think we can mention today for protecting is just imagining yourself in a bubble, making that as kind of solid as you can. So
Hmm.
essentially, you're trying to visualize in some way or sense in some way the outside edge of your aura, as we were talking about at the beginning, that extends beyond the physical body. So if that was an egg shape or a bubble, or to be honest, whatever imagery works for you, but something, and really when you're doing that, remember that you have a back and you have under your feet, and because we tend to be quite focused on the front of our bodies, and the top half of our body. So, including your legs and your feet and all the way down your back when you're imagining this sphere of some kind around you. And just having some sense of that in your mind, particularly if it's something that you initially practice and try to really feel into a little bit. So you're not just doing a mental exercise. And also something that you practice regularly, I think
Hmm.
can help you to kind of move that from being just something you think about to something that starts to have a kind of a bit of a benefit. So that's a very, very simple tool that you could try to help to protect your aura a little bit better.
Yes. The other way that is, and well, this won't protect it, but it will clean it, and allow that self repair process to be much quicker and thorough, is to use sage on yourself, right? Because that will clean out the energy that's gotten stuck and trapped in it. Um, and and also just to sage your environment will take out some of the energy, that the damaging energy in your environment, which will also make it easier for your aura. And just to be clear, when I say sage, what I mean is burning something that creates smoke. A lot of people want to burn sage. I think there's a history and a tradition behind that. But if that's your tradition and your habit, that's lovely. But it doesn't have to be. It can be any kind of incense. Really, it's the smoke that does the job, not the material that you're burning that does the job. But that will take the energy out of your aura.
And choose one you like the smell of.
Choose when you like the smell of. Yeah,
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 and
yeah.
that feels kind of good to you. And ideally, incense can. I mean, I think one of the things that's lovely about sage is it's dried leaves, so it doesn't have any extra chemicals or additives or that kind of stuff. So incense can vary quite a lot in its quality, I think, and how many
Hmm.
ingredients are used and whether artificial perfume is added, and so find something that is as natural and kind of pure in its ingredients as possible, so you're not
Hmm.
adding more stress potentially to any parts of you, not just your aura, but yeah, yeah, something you enjoy the smell of.
Yeah, and
Right. Sorry, go on.
well, I was going to mention, because you talked about learning to protect it, so that that barrier between us and the world is thicker. And of course, we're going to do our best to get that job done for you as fast as we can, so that we can teach it to you. But we're not the only people teaching it. You'll find people around you that might be able to teach it to you as well. But equally, learning to clean it. The thing about learning to clean it is that you're really, what you're doing is you're learning to feel and understand the self-cleansing mechanism so that you can do it at will. And that's not dissimilar to understanding that getting your eye to water flushes it out. And then knowing that if you take your eyelid and take it away from your body and then pull it down a little bit, it forces your eyelid to water, and then that will flush it. Or just by rubbing your eye will get it to flush out. So this is the best analogy I can think of, but just that sense of, I know what it feels like when my aura is cleansing itself, and I can pick the reins up for that and do it myself. So, out of the scope of this podcast, but we're going to do our best to, I don't know, maybe do a workshop or a video or something. We'll figure it out. But there might be people around you that you can learn that too. The smoking yourself, saging yourself will do a similar thing just about as well, just a lot more mechanically.
Yeah, I think for me, the sage is a really good one to fall back on, even if you do learn how to clean your aura yourself or boost its capacity to clean itself, if you like. The sage for me is a good one. Like if you're feeling a bit tired or a bit off balance or really emotional, I think sometimes having something more external to you to help you
Mm-hmm.
clean it can be really nice. And you could even ask someone you feel comfortable with to wave the sage around you or the smoke around you. So it's something, and it also gives it's something which I guess in part because it's more mechanical, our mind, visually we see something physical happening. So sometimes that can be easier for our mind to just then rest and go, I've done the task, it's okay, rather than maybe particularly at the beginning sitting there thinking, did I do it right? Have I done it
Yeah.
properly? Have I done it
Yeah.
thoroughly? Like you don't tend to have those kind of potential challenges, let's say, if you're using something like, some
For sure.
smoke. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But the best thing we can teach you, or tell you about, really, rather, to keep your aura healthy and strong, is to learn a self-healing technique called Reiki. Reiki spelled Reiki. We have done a whole podcast about it. You can listen to it. It's super easy to find around you. Um, but Reiki is very specifically targeted towards keeping the aura repaired and keeping it healthy and keeping it strong. And the wonderful thing about Reiki is that you can learn it in a day. and you can use it on yourself, and you don't have to set aside time to do it like you have to do with meditation. So it's very, I mean, with all the things that Karen and I know for all the decades that we've been doing things, keeping an aura strong and clean is still, Reiki is still by far the best way to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's why mostly whatever else we do in our clinic rooms with our clients who are coming for healing, there will nearly always be some Reiki happening. I mean, supporting our auras isn't the only reason, but it's really up there with one of the big reasons why we would nearly always use Reiki with somebody alongside whatever else we're doing together, to help whatever their problem
Yeah,
is.
it's a great carrier wave for so many other frequencies.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, that's okay. You go.
Well, just to point out that everything that we've been talking about has really been about self-care, because at the end of the day, you know, increasing your energy, intelligence, and understanding and making your life better is, you know, as Karen joked earlier, we would love to be teaching all of this to kindergarteners, right? Like we could have learned this when we were learning to brush our teeth. Our lives would be so much easier. And we'd be out of a job mostly. But just a reminder that sometimes, just like in any part of our healthcare, the aura may be too compromised to be able to fix yourself, and you may need an outside opinion, a more professional opinion. And that's part of knowing how to take care of ourselves, is knowing when we can use home remedies and self-care and when it's time to seek out professional advanced care.
Yeah, and I think as we often add with when we get to that point about something, it's not a failure to need that extra help, and it's often not a failure in your self-care. And you know, it might be, but again, that's okay to get some help with that, because we tend to struggle with self-care when we're under more pressure. So that, which is exactly the time when we tend to need a bit of extra outside support. So really to try and ease as much of the potential for judgment on our, you know, on ourselves with that as we can, to support you, to say, you know, find a good healer, and you know, start from a good place if you want to you know, get someone to help you with it. And that can also really give you a sense of, okay, how do I feel differently when my aura is clean and healthy and well protected? That's the feeling I'm looking for when I'm doing my self-care practice. So if you can go and find a good healer and get some experience of that, it may help you, give you a better guide as to a bit like, you know, we go to the dentist, see the hygienist maybe, and they give your teeth a really thorough clean. And that's kind of what we're aiming for when we brush our teeth, knowing that, you know, we may not be able to do it quite as well because we can't reach all the, you know, nooks and crannies that the hygienist might do, but we're kind of looking for that same feeling.
Do you think our clients brush up on their Reiki and their saging of themselves before their appointments with us, a bit like I brush up on my flossing before I see the hygienist?
Sometimes. Yeah.
I wonder if that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we give you an idea. This is an introductory idea, introduced you to the idea that you have an aura or a biofield, whatever you want to call it, that its job is to filter the world and the worlds of energy and you, to protect you. And just like any other organ that you have in your body, sometimes it needs a little TLC. Not sometimes, it will need a little TLC to stay healthy and work at its most optimum.
Yeah, and yeah, hopefully we've given you a few ideas. We will have more episodes coming that will be more specific and talk you through some other techniques, but hopefully we'll leave you today with a few ideas about how to begin to add some aura self-care to your other self-care for all the other parts of you. So thank you very much for joining us today. It's been great to have you with us, and do listen again to some of our other episodes.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Hi, I'm Carol Smith, the producer of the Life Made Easier podcast. We hope today's episode gave you some meaningful tools and takeaways to help make your life feel a little lighter. You've reached the end of this episode, but not the end of the ways that you can support us. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, follow us on social media, and check out our Patreon for extra content and ways you can go deeper with us. There's also a whole library of episodes waiting for you to help increase your energy intelligence. Take care, and we'll see you on the next Life Made Easier.